So we are starting with the live on.
Okay, ma'am. Okay. Okay. Ma'am, can you please send me the link, YouTube link,
Sure, sir.
on
Yes.
WhatsApp? Yeah, ma'am.
I will post it on the
Yes,
chat, sir. Is that possible? Is it okay, sir?
Chat, I can copy it, no?
Okay.
I will send it through WhatsApp.
On
sir.
WhatsApp? WhatsApp. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I could copy it. I copied it. No problem.
Okay.
Oh, okay, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I posted in the chat window.
Oh.
Dear teachers. Actually, your webinar series was so useful, sir. Only that initiated us to do this webinar series.
Yes, ma'am. True.
It's very nice.
Actually, sir only, ma'am. Dr. Arani Wilson, no? He only was instrumental in doing that. I was only helping him. Reena, ma'am, has come. Hello, ma'am. How are you, ma'am? Your audio is muted, ma'am.
Audio is muted.
And I'm muted.
Sir. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am.
Ten more minutes are there.
It's 4:47. If things are ready, I think we can start. Or shall we wait till 5 o'clock now?
Yeah, because people will be joining us. We are early today.
Quite early.
Most of them are, you have students, right? Most of them are students, right? What is the ratio, ma'am, for students and staff? Ratio, faculty ratio?
Vidya?
For today, sir, for
Kind of ratio, ma'am, between students and staff now in the meeting now?
the meeting now, probably there's
Normally.
a little number of students. More about...
More of faculty members. Is
Oh, faculty only? Oh, okay,
yes,
okay.
a lot of faculty members.
Okay, ma'am, okay.
And some research scholars are also there, sir.
Okay, okay. It is from Ethiraj as well as from outside, no?
Yes,
Mostly
sir.
from outside, all over India. So we have few participants from Shillong also.
Nice, ma'am. Nice. Okay. And mostly it's a microbiology crowd, right?
Yes, sir. Microbiology.
Okay, ma'am, okay.
Life sciences, basically.
Life sciences, okay.
We have biochemistry, bioinformatics, biotechnology also.
Okay. From throughout the state also you got, is it?
Yeah.
From other parts of...
Other parts of the India also.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Throughout the state also we have.
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
And we've also uploaded the recorded versions of day 1 and day 2 webinar sessions, sir.
Uploaded on, ma'am?
Uploaded in the YouTube, sir.
Oh, you uploaded already? Oh,
Yes,
nice.
it's
nice.
already on the day
Okay,
itself.
ma'am.
We will upload it, sir.
Okay, ma'am.
We
Okay,
can see the
okay.
YouTube live stream as well as the recorded version after 2 hours.
After 2 hours. Okay. Okay.
I think we'll start with there because already 93 people are there in the waiting room.
Okay, ma'am.
We can allow them and I think we can start. Is it okay, sir? We'll start because 93 people are already there in the waiting room. We can have only 100.
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
Two streaming
So now
is
it's
there.
showing 100, no?
Yes.
Now
Yes,
it's showing 100 also. Okay.
yes.
So we'll start, sir.
We'll start, ma'am. Start. Ma'am, is my voice clear?
Yes, sir. Your voice is very
It's
clear.
okay? Okay, okay.
Yes.
Loud enough, sir.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am. Sir.
Yes, Vidya. We'll start.
More people are joining now.
Okay.
3 more are waiting.
Okay.
So we are starting the series. Good evening. On behalf of the Department of Microbiology, Ethiraj College for Women, I welcome you all to the webinar series on exploring and understanding world pandemics, day 3. Before entering the sessions, few instructions to the participants. Participants, kindly mute your audio until the session ends. Every participant will receive a mail around 5 p.m. containing YouTube live link, feedback for today's session, and the link for the recorded video of the previous day's session. Thank you. We will now begin the speaker session. Our speaker for today is Dr. Daniel Alex Anand. Dr. Daniel Alex Anand, sir, Associate Professor, Department of Bioinformatics, the Center for Molecular Data Science and Systems Biology, Satyabama Institute of Science and Technology, Chennai. Sir has a keen interest in human genetics, genomics, which included study of the complex effects of single nucleotide polymorphisms in complex diseases, neurodevelopmental and neurodegenerative disorders, autoimmune disorders, and holistic studies on HIV. A systems biology perspective for understanding disease mechanisms and novel therapeutic strategies using big data analytics, artificial intelligence, including machine learning, deep learning, and mathematical modeling to enable pharmacogenomics, personalized medicine, and translational informatics have been the fulcrum of most of his published research papers. We welcome you, sir. His
Thank you, ma'am.
topic His topic today is why are the pandemics hard to understand? Over to Sir now.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
1 second, ma'am.
Okay.
I'm not able to share my screen.
Okay, sir, I'll make you the host.
Is this okay? Is this okay now?
Yes. Is
it okay now? Yeah?
Yes.
Can you see the complete screen? You can see, no?
Yes, sir. Sorry.
Okay. Am I audible? Clear?
Yes, sir.
Clear, ma'am? Okay. Good evening. At the outset, I would like to thank the organizers for this privilege and opportunity, the Department of Microbiology, Ethiraj College for Women, for organizing this 3-part webinar series. And I'm really happy that for the last few years, I have known the department, I've visited the department, and I've known a lot of people there, the HOD ma'am, Dr. Prema ma'am, Dr. Vidya, Dr. Reena, and Dr. Subhashini. And I'm happy for this opportunity. I'm thankful to the organizers as well as my parent institution, Satyabama, for giving me this opportunity today to talk on this webinar. I have been looking into. I've been joining the previous 2 speakers also in the last 2 days, and I have been listening to their beautiful lectures in the last 2 days. I'm sure all of you are benefited, and I understand that this is actually a very cross-sectional audience where we have participants from throughout the country and from different fields, as well as a lot of faculty members are there. I'm really glad to be here today. And this topic, which I was not really sure what was what kind of title I should give for my talk, but since it was about exploring and understanding pandemics, I thought probably there are a few things which I would like to share some of the insights which I've learned during the last few years, as well as I'm learning. And with this topic, I just want to clarify this topic before I go on. Why are the pandemics hard to understand? It's exactly not about understanding alone. It is also about combating. Combat is a word which we normally use in the battlefield. How do you face the enemy and how do you overcome the enemy? Okay, so it's about how are we trying to understand what have we learned, what are the lessons we have learned across the years, and also we are trying to actually look into places where we have failed and how are we going to combat pandemics. This word pandemics, again, I would like to, once again, I would like to tell one point. Though ma'am has given me a beautiful introduction about myself, I'm basically a medical microbiologist. I had my master's at Tharamani, and then my PhD also was in Tharamani in microbiology faculty of medicine. And then during my PhD, I moved over to bioinformatics. So just after my PhD, I joined Satyabama, and I've been working there for the last 13 years in the Department of Bioinformatics, teaching students basic sciences as well as bioinformatics programming and all the other things. So I would like to convey that I'm a hardcore, basically I'm a trained microbiologist. So this pandemic is a word which I came across for the first time when I was doing my MSc. It was in 25 years back in 1995. And at that time, we used to associate this only with HIV/AIDS. That was the only pandemic I was probably very keen on when I was studying. Okay. So I would like to make it a very light session. I just didn't want to probably give too much of heavy stuff here. So I just wanted to take you along a gradual journey as to how things went on. And I'm sure I'm not going to repeat things which the previous two speakers have spoken. Most of the things I would not repeat. Pardon me if there are a few repetitions. So this was actually the whole, probably our understanding of an epidemic and a pandemic starts about 100 years ago. And probably even now, if we ask someone what has been the biggest disaster of the 20th century, and nobody answers in terms of an epidemic, a problem because of a microbe. The Spanish flu is remembered by people who have probably suffered in a large way, but collectively, to the student community, to the world community, we still do not consider that to be a big disaster or devastation which is brought about by a virus. So it is not historically a disaster. Even now, we don't consider that, but millions of people died. There have been a lot of tragedies which have come out because of the influenza epidemic of 1918. That was actually the time when World War I was ending, and there was no antibiotics then. We do not have air travel then, but still we understand that it was actually an epidemic which spread throughout the world. Very strange. The fastest mode of travel was probably a train, and still you find that it had actually spread throughout the world. So many died, and still it is not considered a historical disaster. Now, when you look into this basic statistics, which is again taken from very old journals, we understand that this epidemic it really started in March 1918, and it went on till March 1919. That's all. It's about 1 year it went on, and it came up in 3 waves. There was actually 3 waves of this, and it actually killed a lot of people. It killed the young and the old alike. And we find that a lot of countries, especially the troops, the soldiers who came back from war, they were also affected. And it was not actually, it didn't have a specific predisposition towards age. So when this was happening, again, we see the same things which we are seeing today. This which happened the Spanish flu also. It was actually a blame game. It was actually putting the blame on others. Where did it start? How did it start? Just like now everyone's blaming China. This was actually a time when even the name Spanish is a misnomer. We really do not have proper documented evidence that it all started in Spain. No, Spain was actually not a part of the First World War. It was actually not a big player. But then they had a free press, so the press was reporting things, and it was also like it was a case when there was a lot of censorship, and no bad news was allowed to be published. And we find that as of now, if you look into the history, you would find that the actual origin was in the US. It was at Kansas, and it actually spread from there to all parts of the world. That's exactly what we learn about. And it was actually called by different names. We didn't have CDC then, and it was called by different names by different people. In China, it was called a name. In Japan, it was called a name, and things like that. Yeah, and we did not know how it was transmitted also. There is a lot of debate whether it was actually from birds or human to human and things like that. So this is actually the origin of the Spanish flu, which was by the strain called H1N1. H1 is hemagglutinin and N stands for neuraminidase. Okay, now this is actually the spread, and it actually spread globally. And how did it spread? What was the travel mode? And there were only trains, and troops were there. There were mass gatherings there. Now there were a lot of religious celebrations and festival celebrations for the war, as well as religious festivals. And we really do not know. There is nothing called disease surveillance, and people were not aware of the public health importance. Even etiology was debated. People were not clear about the viral etiology then. And it actually went on then, probably about 3 or 4 waves. It went throughout the world, and it was actually a devastating issue. And right now, we also understand that bacterial pneumonia, secondary bacterial infections, were also one of the main reasons for death in patients in the Spanish flu. Look at this. Look at the range. That's exactly what I'm trying to say here. So up to 100 million deaths, 100 million deaths. A million is 10 past 6. And you find the range here. See, in India, you find just 10 to 17 million. And what sort of range is that? Why would there be such a range? The reason was that we did not have proper methods of reporting and documentation. People were not exactly taking records. They're not reporting the right numbers, just like we find today also. A lot of places we really have doubts about what the actual numbers are. And the other issue was islands. So whenever you look at a pandemic or an epidemic outbreak, islands get affected. A lot of islands lost a lot of, more than 20-30% of people died in these islands of Samoa, Tahiti, and Nauru, etc. Okay, there have been a lot of impacts when we try to look into the actual impact of the Spanish flu. We would say that death of the patients were one, and then apart from that, we also had a huge economic loss, and as we see this day with Corona. But there is also the positive side, where there were, because of the Spanish flu, there started a lot of expansion of the health systems. So most of the European countries started to actually develop a lot of systems where they could get ready for problems as such as this with public health importance, and a lot of medical research facilities were started, and those were some of the positive side. But still, a lot of children who were orphaned, and even we also started to learn about healthy lifestyles, etc. So epidemics and pandemics always have long-term effect on the population as a whole. And the response, when you look into the response of the Spanish flu, I'll be talking about a few of these pandemics, and then we will, and as we go along, we'll be looking into the problems, why we're not able to understand, why we're not able to contain. Okay. So responses was kind of scattered. It was very uncoordinated. We really didn't have social media. We don't have proper news, and it was very uncoordinated. And across the world, there were different ways in which people dealt with it. That was a time when we were trying to understand. We understood the germ theory, but still the basic things which were followed by the population then are the ones which we are doing. It's really we've gone so primitive now, by quarantining and closing schools and banning public gatherings. We are really we have to understand that we've really gone back to the days when people really lived in this primitive lifestyle. It's not exactly primitive, but this is a very basic lifestyle to prevent infections. If you look at this picture out here, you can see the picture out here. This is actually the place where patients are there. And this is again a problem. You may have a lot of patients, you may have a lot of people who are not infected, but still these kind of units also pose a very big problem. And here you see here on the left side, the children wearing masks. Those are actually children from Japan. This was actually an etiquette, a practice which Japanese started following after this. They started to wear a mask if they have an infection, it is for the safety of the others. They do not want. Even today, Japanese do that. This is very, very important. This basic civic sense and the concept of other people is so important if we need to give a proper response to these infections. And as we see across the years, from 1919 it started, then we had, so all of these are actually, most of them are flu, Spanish flu, Asian flu, Hong Kong flu, Russian flu, avian, swine flu. So across these years, you find that most of these are flu epidemics in the blue colored, and on top you would find some of them which are not flu. Okay, we had the West Nile virus, which also had a few deaths. Ebola, it was somewhere in 1976. It actually had its origin in the 1940s. And then we have HIV, which has been probably 91 onward. It is still continuing on. We'll go a little bit deeper on HIV as we go on to the next few slides. And then towards the beginning of 2000, we had the respiratory viruses, SARS and MERS, etc. So these are actually the major epidemics, and we find that flu especially, it's because of the mutations in the novel antigenic makeups. We need to have a flu shot, a flu vaccine, a different flu vaccine every year. People are working on universal flu vaccines. So when you look into the actual problem which a pandemic poses, so we're trying to look into why are pandemics hard to understand. Now, pandemics are actually not a microbiology exclusive issue. If you look into this arrow, this is basically the spread of infectious disease. But then there's a lot of effect. You find that there's a lot of climate change problem goes on. There's a lot of migration, social instability goes on. There's a lot of cyber attacks, water crisis. So all of these are linked together. This is actually a report by the World Economic Forum, and it was in 2018. This was actually a report which was published. So what we understand is that this is a pandemic poses a lot of global risks. And as we see these days now, we're now in a moment in India where we are trying to actually let loose things. When the number of cases is increasing, the government is actually having a lot of problem with the economy, and we're trying to let loose. Economy is always going to be affected. That is what happens here. All of these ovals denote how much of economic loss. So this is actually the estimate cost, and across the years, what are the different outbreaks. If you look into that, we're talking in terms of billions, 4.5 to 5.5 billion with post-SARS. This is actually SARS was 30 to 50 billion. So we're talking about billions of dollars, which were actually probably the actual loss, and a lot of hit on GDP. Tourism is lost, and food production, transport is stopped. And there is actually a gross societal destabilization which goes on as far as whenever we have an epidemic or a pandemic of this scale. And we need to also understand that epidemics and pandemics are not only exclusive to humans, but it is also for animals and for plants. Phylloxera was an epidemic of the grapevines, and it affected a lot of wine production. And this is going on. It's not alone restricted, just like there is actually a lot of connectivity between zoonotic animals and humans. We also have a lot of connection between plants and the ecosystem. And when you look into the SARS epidemic, this is actually the epidemic curve in Hong Kong, which happened. And Hong Kong is again a place which is very famous for the population density. We have a lot of a large number of people out there, and you find that whenever there is a high population density, it is really a problem with epidemics and pandemics. That's probably again one of the biggest issues facing India now. So we are one of the there are lots of places in India, especially the cities, where we have a lot of population density. So animals are involved, population density is involved, spread. You know, there's only one traveler who went from Hong Kong to Toronto, and this travel does not take days or weeks these days like the previous olden days. It is only a matter of hours. So for the virus to spread from one part of the world to another. So that's again one of the biggest problems we are facing now. And when it came to MERS, also the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, you find that it's also a part of the coronavirus virus group, and it came from animals, from camels to an Abu Dhabi, and a businessman travels from Abu Dhabi to Seoul and gone. So the entire country gets affected, and it spreads throughout. And you find that especially in Korea, we have a lot of highly networked hospitals, and you have a lot of hospitals, and it spread like wildfire among these hospitals. Okay, that is about the SARS and MERS. Now we're moving on to another one very important epidemic, which had its origin in Africa. Africa is a place again known for a lot of things, HIV/AIDS, for a lot of serious epidemic outbreaks have had its source in Central and Western Africa. Here you see that this is actually the 1940s. This is the first in Uganda. It is you find that Zika is the name of the forest. It's supposed to be a name of the forest in Uganda. And as you see here, Uganda Virus Research, and you also have an MRC unit there. And in 1947 was the first case, And then it actually goes on like that for 70 years. 70 years, we do not have a human outbreak. But then later on, in about 2015, you have an outbreak in Brazil. And this is actually a virus which is actually discovered for the first time when scientists were studying the ecology of the yellow fever virus in monkeys. And it's also arthropod borne. It is actually by the Aedes aegypti mosquito. And it was actually a virus which really literally went on without a disease for 70 years. And after that, we find that it resulted in human infections. And after German measles or rubella, microcephaly is a condition which is produced when the mother gets infected in the first trimester of pregnancy. And you find that this is also posing a problem. Yeah, but then when we try to really look into infections, epidemics and pandemics, there are two epidemics and pandemics which really scare us to the core. One is Ebola, the other one is HIV/AIDS. That is what has been really associated with really danger. The moment you hear Ebola or HIV/AIDS, we really get scared. So this is actually the first case was in 1976 when it was actually a case when a nun was a Catholic missionary nun was actually she died because of an illness, and they sent the sample to it was actually a very remote location, and it was actually a location which was it was near the Ebola River in Central Africa. And you find that this is actually a case where people who were taking care of people were affected, and it was actually a very sad state. And when scientists hear the news, they go back and they try to investigate, but because it's actually already contained, because it is a very remote location, and they were working with epidemics during that time with a lot of primitive equipment. They did not know the impact this would cause when it comes to the general public. So WHO actually goes on to actually stop research on Ebola at this time. And when you look into, I've titled this slide Peter Piot. Peter Piot was the person who went on to first identify Ebola, and he worked with Ebola for a long time. He's had a lot of positions. He's basically a Belgian microbiologist. And they were working with paper gowns and motorbike goggles and latex gloves. And this is actually, and right now he had an onset of COVID-19, and finally he survived anyway. He's quite old also. So this is actually the first cases of Ebola, which is again, it's one of the most dangerous viral infections, epidemics, which probably could lead to pandemics also. So when you try to define an epidemic, there are actually two important reasons. So when we try to actually understand an epidemic, understand a pandemic, we try to first understand what is the etiology, what is the causative organism, and how is it transmitted. Is it transmitted from person to person, or is it arthropod borne, or is it sexually transmitted, or is it transmitted through fomites, or through things like that, and also about the time. So all of these are actually intricate details, which probably not one person is involved. You have a lot of it is actually a team which works. So what is the epidemic curve? How is the virus evolving? And what are the places where it is associated? For example, in Ebola, it was found that there was a hospital which was actually it was dangerous, and people abandoned the hospital because everyone who was visiting the hospital died. So things are going on like that. And how do people die? For example, there was actually a practice in Africa when they bid farewell to a loved one, and especially in funerals, it is a very personal ceremony. It goes on for a long time. They don't really give it off to professionals, and the family is involved in cleaning up the person who died, etc. And Ebola viral patients are normally with a lot of blood and vomitus, etc. And you find that there's a lot of virus involved there. And two reasons and three questions are very important when we try to define an epidemic. And Ebola and Marburg. Marburg is also similar to Ebola, but then it is different from Ebola. So we had cases, it actually has had its focus out there in Central Africa. And then later on, we find that it actually moved on to Western Africa also. There was actually a case in 2014 we found that there was actually an outbreak in Western Africa with Ebola. Now, whenever we have epidemics and pandemics, one thing which is of critical importance is time. So how quickly are we responding to the infection? And there are lots of other issues involved here. Societal, the political issues which are there, those are also involved. And more importantly, as we as microbiologists, we can only find what we are looking for. So unless we know the etiology, know the pathogen, and we try to look for the pathogen, we will miss the pathogen. So that's what happened here. We find that it actually started in December of 2014, and then it goes on, and finally we had countries like Liberia and Sierra Leone. They all were into a lot of communal, or they were into war. They were just getting out of war, and we find that there was this epidemic, and there is a lot of panic. So widespread panic is sometimes important. It is good because as in this case of our COVID-19 pandemic, we find that we should have probably worked on a little earlier. Time is precious as far as a pandemic is concerned. And when we look into the current scenario, we were looking into earlier years. Now, when we look into the current scenario, we understand that there are lots of advantages and disadvantages. For example, in Liberia, we only have 15 registered physicians for the population of about 5 million. Very pathetic. That's again one of the reasons why people don't really take seriously. People don't really know what is happening there at all. And by the time they know, things are out of hand. So, and also when it comes to science as such, technology as such, we understand that we have a lot of new techniques where we need not actually really go on to do primitive techniques, but we can do gene sequencing, which is done overnight even for a human genome. And you find that all of these techniques are very, very important in order to expect the unexpected and run quickly. And there was actually a kind of perfect storm. This is actually an editorial in Science, and the storm really took up, and then it resulted in a lot of issues. So a pandemic, as I told you, it has got a lot of societal and political implications. So whenever life comes to a screeching halt, that's exactly the word I associate with what happened in COVID-19. We've come to a screeching halt. So the world has come to a screeching halt, but still life has to go on. We need to eat. We need to take care of the sick. So a lot of things are at stake right now, and there are a lot of political players there, social unrest, there is no buying and selling going on. So all of these things are the community reactions which are associated with a pandemic. So the need during an epidemic or a pandemic, I just went on to list out a few things. Medical care, it's very important. Coordination among local bodies as well as the global bodies is very important. How do you actually work out things? Logistics is very important. Communication. Probably right now we don't suffer with communication issues, but wrong communication is very important. Is the bane of the issues right now. And we have a lot of coordination with even the armed forces. The silver lining out here is it should actually be even then this was the case, and even now we need to understand that we have to initiate research. So. Basic research, this is an opportunity for us to initiate basic research in life science and social sciences, mathematical modeling, as well as evaluation of therapeutic vaccines, experimental therapies. So sample size, probably we should collect more samples, and probably the funding during these times normally sometimes come from military, from the defense, from anti-bioterrorism, and there should be a lot of promotion of experimental vaccines by different pharma companies. So ultimate goal is to stop the spread. And protection of health workers by vaccines, it probably really helps them to work well. You know, like wearing a protective clothing 24/7, it is so cumbersome for researchers and for people who are really in the front line of the battle. So what have we learned and what have we not learning? So a perfect storm, but what we saw in the Ebola storm can actually generate a lot of major epidemics unless we're going to act early. And public trust is key. Even now you see in India, the same thing is happening, and even through the world. You find that people are not contained. They're not understanding the importance. So if there's going to be a second wave, like there are some reports from Wuhan, so India will not stand When China couldn't stand, if US couldn't stand, and we got mass graves in Italy and Spain, India will not stand. So public trust is very important when we try to understand and combat pandemics. And uh, global governance. Global governance is very important. R&D has to take a lead role and work on things. So this is the Democratic Republic of Congo. It was initially called Zaire, and this is actually again a case which happened recently, and there were a lot of such things. All of these points were actually worked out. We had a lot of trial vaccines which were generated. Modeling was done. So all of this is actually healthy. So that's probably one of the reasons Ebola outbreaks are contained. So we know that it is dangerous, and we do not have Basel IV facilities to work on them. And so we try to actually go there, and we have teams always ready to work. And the real problem comes in when epidemic comes in, when there is a humanitarian crisis. As I told you, at the end of a war, what happens when an epidemic comes up? This is actually a case when this is one of the worst records of cholera epidemic in Yemen. Yemen was just then was actually coming out of a lot of problems. A lot of war was going on, and then finally you find that there was actually more than 1 million suspected cases of cholera, and this is actually one of the worst cholera outbreaks, and it went out of control, and a lot of casualties, a lot of fatalities occurred. Now we are moving on from this phase to another phase where we're trying to talk about one more very important epidemic, which had become a pandemic apart from Ebola. We're talking about HIV/AIDS. Now, what happens when an emerging disease becomes an endemic, or what happens when a pandemic becomes an endemic? That's what exactly has happened with HIV/AIDS. So we are right now, we don't call HIV/AIDS, though it's actually a pandemic. It has actually now gone into a kind of simmering fashion, and you find that there is a gradual plateau in the graphs, which actually where we see the number of HIV/AIDS patients across the world. That's exactly what happens in the later stage. This is actually the start of HIV/AIDS pandemic. There's actually 6 gay Americans. We really should not actually be associating sexual orientation of humans with HIV/AIDS, but that's exactly what happened during that time. They told it was a gay disease, and we now understand it's wrong. It's not so. And this is actually the scenario. Yesterday I got this from UNAIDS. 37.9 million people who are living globally, 37.9 million people living with HIV/AIDS. This is actually 2018. It is not updated after that. And you find that there have been a lot of initiatives taken worldwide. Nelson Mandela, Bill Gates. So you find that there have been a lot of worldwide measures taken. And another very important thing is that when we work out on drugs, it is very interesting to know that 1996 was probably the time when we started to look into combination therapy for HIV/AIDS, and it was actually very costly then. It was about $14,000 per year per person. None of the countries could afford it, so we went on to work on it. Right now, it is actually something like $1 per month for a patient. That's how it has come out to now. So it's quite affordable now. So working on these things, it is actually very important. Working on therapeutic measures is very important for combating pandemics. So this is supposed to be the history of HIV and AIDS. The earliest cases were in 1968, in 1882. Was really a decline. Still, we really do not have completely conquered the disease. Reason why? Reason is that sometimes we have a lot of bureaucracy. We are not to close the book on infectious diseases. That's exactly what people told. So after so many years, also after spending thousands and billions of dollars, just look at these figures: 186 million in 1997 to 759 $1 million in 2005. God knows what is the amount of expenditure we're actually putting on to developing vaccines. People will keep telling us that we are ending we will see the end. We will see the end of HIV/AIDS. See the end of Ebola. We will see the end of these pandemics. There have been major achievements, no doubt. There have been 40% reduction in HIV cases across the years, and then we've got actually fatalities. Deaths have also have gone down. People after receiving ART, they have actually gone on to survive for a longer time. But then look at this. This is 2,000 million. I'm sorry, it is 2 million. 2 million cases are actually continually found infected with HIV/AIDS at any point in time in the world. Now, that is what is called what happens when a pandemic becomes endemic. Okay, so it is supposed to be, we're not really talking too much about HIV/AIDS as we do of Corona now. So, but then the WHO actually has declared that they'll be seeing an end to HIV/AIDS by 2030. But then we are not supposed to believe these numbers and dates and these visions which people keep on putting up. I'm sorry. Yeah. So can you look into the commonality of HIV/AIDS? All of these infections and epidemics and pandemics. You look, all of these emerging infectious diseases are zoonosis. You've got poultry, you've got the swine involved, you've got chimpanzees involved in influenza and HIV/AIDS, and bat is basically sometimes probably and it's only like it's only I think I had a slide on bat biology. I'll check it out. So we find that a lot of zoonoses are involved here. So how are we going to work on them? We really do not have. We're trying to only deforest. Deforestation goes on in such an indiscriminate manner, and then we also understand that the problem is getting bigger. When we say that a person with a medical complication would die because of corona, what do we mean? We're only meaning that the risk has gotten bigger. We got a lot of problems in the way we live. That's exactly what we're trying to do. The way we sleep, the way we eat, the food we eat, the water we drink, all of the pollution we generate. So pandemics are actually have a very complex phase where international travel, climate change, conflicts in the world, deforestation, the food demand, supply demand, and then you have population growth, urbanization. All of these are only increasing the risks of the pandemic. And another one very important pandemic, which probably we really do not give an importance to, is actually the overuse, misuse, and the abuse of antibiotics. So this is actually some statistics I got recently, and you find that there will be about 10 million deaths by 2050, resulting in a loss of about 66 trillion pounds. We are looking to a future which is very bleak. It's basically a preventable issue. Microbiologists and doctors, clinicians are equally responsible for this, the global threat of antimicrobial resistance, and we are confronting untreatable infections because of our own overuse and misuse. Yeah, I want to tell you, this might make you smile, but actually I really went through this. Like there was a time when I was told I was going to study biology, genetics. People told me that, hey, biology is for girls, man. No, you are supposed to do something more manly, that sort of thing. And we don't have any future in microbiology. You don't do that. Even doctors who do antimicrobiology are not respected. They're not considered to be the doctor, the real doctor. They're considered laboratory personnel. Now, we need to understand that, yeah, we do have antibiotics, we do have vaccines, we do have sanitation, but there is still a lot more need to study the cell biology, basic cells. Probably still like basic research goes on in Germany where they study the cell wall structure of a gram-negative bacillus or things like that. So there's a lot of need for understanding basic sciences. And at the end of every pandemic, there would be a lot of deliberation and there will be outbreak of panels. This is what happened at the end of Ebola. So there'll be a lot of rules framed, policies made. They are very good. They're very good. Most of them are very good. So we need to strengthen the epidemic preparedness, and the public health systems in countries are to be prepared, especially not alone the global response, but the local response, because that is critical for preventing, for containing the infection. And especially NGOs and private sector are very important. And we are not supposed to be selfish and in sharing data and samples. The right data and the samples are to be shared in a timely manner. And also R&D systems are to be encouraged in pharma companies. When you make an Ebola virus, you're not going to make a fortune out of it, but still you're supposed to work even when there are no market incentives. And G7, G20. So people meet and talk, but what is our top agenda? Has it really been? When I was preparing for this lecture, I was going through a lot of videos and lectures and materials where people have been talking about this from 2000 onwards, 2010, 12, 13, so much of talks in Oxford and all this happening, but still this is not really our top agenda. So we need to understand that time is of essence. In UK, they went on to do a lot of work, especially after they formed a lot of teams, etc. But government goes on to have a problem that why would we pay a person when there is no epidemic at all? No, it's not the case. There will always be a problem. There will always be need for people who are required. This was actually an initiative by the UK government. It is called CEPI, Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations. And so we need to bring together, the coalition is between governments, big pharma, NGOs, small pharma, academia. So all of these are to come together to conquer diseases like Lassa, fever, MERS, Nipah virus, etc. And also we need to understand that we need to use the social media in the right manner. There have been a lot of problems, like there have been girls in Copenhagen which they've been refusing HPV because they were feeling giddy after the vaccination. It's for the long run, and that's exactly what's happening in the India's measles rubella vaccine campaign. And all of these things are actually good. So a lot of stigmas associated. So we as students, faculty, and communicators of science need to take the right message across. So are we going to be ready? 7.6 billion was in 2018. Today morning I saw this is supposed to be 7.8 billion right now in 2020. That's what is the world population. But are we going to be ready? Are we going to be mobile? Are we going to really work towards basic science? So this is the case in 2014 in Africa. Can you see this picture? What is strange in this picture? The only thing which is of quality in this lab of this man is this microscope which he's got. It is a binocular microscope. Otherwise, all of this, look at the centrifuge out here. Such a primitive lab. And the people don't have money to pay for drugs. So they leave their cycles and go. So we have a lot of promises which are made by governments to take care of the society. But then this is what happens actually. We don't really, the rich countries do not help the poor countries. So all of these are very major issues. And right now, something which happens in Africa can reach us tomorrow. That's the speed with which travel occurs these days. So I would like to probably also, as we as students of microbiology, of biotechnology, we have to understand that we have to change. Nothing is so painful to the human mind as a great and sudden change. It's what happened with Corona. Paradigm is actually the viewpoint. So we need to shift our viewpoints as educators, as students. So as we try to actually, me as a microbiologist, when I was trying to look into problems in research, there was a time when I had to make a very difficult change. My professor asked me, go read a book, man. He asked me, just take a book and read. So I just went on to read a book, and now I'm not telling that I've really contributed too much to the society, but I'm telling you that I have the understanding of the big picture. For a person who knows microbiology, who knows informatics, this is not exactly an exciting time, but it's actually a time when I can see the big picture as to what's happening. Where should we thrust? Where should our focus be? So right now we are in a department of bioinformatics where we're trying to talk about what we call systems medicine. It's actually a kind of a holistic approach. a holistic approach. So we've been trying to tell that, okay, go down to the cell, break open the DNA, look into the SNPs. So that's when we try to understand these. And after we've done all that, we understand that no, that's not the way it works. We need to now come back again, like Kalpana Chawla, go to outer space and look at Earth and get a bigger picture. So it is about getting a big picture. So it's like blind men looking at touching the elephant and telling it's this and that. So it's actually exactly what happens. So systems medicine is basically a kind of, it is supposed to be the in thing now. It's supposed to be the thing where we try to actually move from bioinformatics and things like that, where we do a lot of statistics. We try to look into all the metabolomics, the proteomics, genomics, transcriptomics, machine learning comes into play, computer science comes into play in a major way. So all of these things are helping out understand life and cell. And we also, as microbiologists, as people of life science, we are not to get trashes when we hear the word mathematics and computers. I hope you understand what I mean. Most of us are allergic to mathematics. No, we are comfortable with biology, that's fine. But then we need to understand that biology has got a lot of patterns. Life has got a lot of patterns. We need to look into things from a different perspective. We need to change our paradigms. So computational and mathematical biology, this is actually a chapter name which I've taken from a book. I'm right now teaching this paper to my students. It's called Bioinformatics Algorithms. So this is about, we're talking about core biological issues. Why have biologists still not developed an HIV vaccine? How do we look? How does a computer scientist look at a biological problem? It's a very rigorous approach to biology, which we never do as biologists at all. This is again data science. Where does data science come into life science? Now, this is actually a repository, a public repository. Kaggle is supposed to be a public repository for machine learning data. So you find that a lot of data from the gene sequence data, from the epidemiological data, all of this is available for free. So there are a lot of work going on. A lot of scientists across the world are burning their midnight oil and sitting and working. So much of work goes on structural biology and in understanding how things are spreading, how to work on COVID. A lot of forecasting is done. Biology has moved on from an observational science from Mendelian times to a predictive science now. So we need to keep up with the times. We need to update ourselves. It's very important. So there are a lot of competitions which are going on, and then all of these are biological problems. I'm not telling you that go and study computer science. No, these are ultimately biological problems, but we need to understand that we need to work together in teams. We need to form teams. We need to form coalitions in groups, especially even in Chennai. We could actually link together as people who know informatics, people who know biology, people who are in medicine. We need to work together, and only then we will be able to do quality research. Yeah, this is actually a real-time tracking for COVID. It's from NextTrain. You can actually check into this and see how quickly data is being exchanged these days. How are we trying to do a real-time tracking of the pathogen evolution? How do we understand genomic epidemiology of the coronavirus? And how many countries are involved? These are awesome things which we as biologists should be interested in. We have to look into things from a different perspective. Okay. The computer is just as important as a tool for chemists as a test tube. This is actually a word by a Nobel Prize winning chemist in 2013. Yeah. A very interesting word here. We don't call a biologist a pipette biologist or a microscopy biologist, right? Or a cell culture biologist. Same thing is with computational. Computers are just a tool. Gary Kasparov lost to a computer called Deep Blue in the late part of 1990s. And now he usually goes around talking to people about how his mind has changed. He's one of the greatest chess players of all times, and he does not take defeat easily. Vishayanand actually beat Gary Kasparov to Kasparov actually beat the computer in 2 games. 6 games out of 6 games, he beats the computer in 2 games. And that was a computer which is supposed to be able to make 200 million moves per second. He's written a book called Deep Thinking on that. there's a lot of openings for life science students and researchers in a lot of multinational companies. You would find all of these are actually, I've taken from very recent sources as to how these companies are actually recruiting microbiology students, basic mathematics students, biology students to work on data science and data analytics. A lot of healthcare, artificial intelligence, healthcare and artificial intelligence startups are coming up, and the government is also encouraging a lot of startups. And even the salary is very, very high. India has actually come up recently now. We have a lot of pay involved here, and a lot of emoluments when we try to get into this. And we have a lot of avenues in research also when we can actually network with other institutions and work on. This is a beautiful quote by a Turing awardee, Donald Nutt. He says, "I can't be as confident about computer science as I can be about biology. Biology easily has 500 years of exciting problems to work on." I think it's not even 500, it's over 500 lifetimes. Like computer science don't have problems. Astronomy was supposed to be one of the big data generators, and right now genomics is going to beat astronomy. So we've got so much of problems to work on, and we are the ones who provide problems to computer scientists. So we need to be aware of what is really happening. At our department, so right now our department is called the Department of Bioinformatics and the Center for Molecular Data Science Systems Biology. So we've been having a BTech courses. Right now we're also offering, it probably looks like kind of advertisement, it is not. So I'm trying to tell you that we can work together. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. So we are actually offering BSc and MSc courses in this course called Bioinformatics and Data Science. A lot of our students do work with a lot of MNCs. There's one student, Philippe Sekren, who went on to have his master's and his PhD from Max Planck. It's a pride, actually. So bioinformatics and data science and computational biology are really important for all of us to understand as a I'm speaking to you as a microbiologist. This is a nice quote I saw recently. So online. It's just to inspire some of us who are into research. 30 kb of RNA is a threat to our existence, and all of a sudden everyone wants a drug or a vaccine to combat this tiny entity from the researcher who are paid less than any other professional and get no recognition unless they win the Nobel Prize. It's the passion of the researcher that keeps them going. Kudos to everyone in the scientific research community. Awesome, absolutely. So all of us who are in research, it could be a small level research, it could be a society oriented research, it could be a core research. We are doing it for our passion. I think we should continue. We should encourage a lot more students to work on. This is my last slide. I would like to put a few concluding thoughts. Awareness. The last few couple of weeks or months, I've actually not seen one microbiologist speak on Polymer TV or on any other channel. Why? Do you understand? They just catch hold of some doctor and they speak. There's no virologist speaking on popular media. Probably there are virologists speaking on online media, but you don't really find microbiologists. So awareness, the right awareness is created not by a random doctor, but it is by people who really know the field. We are supposed to produce proper documents. We can just take the phone and start recording and make YouTube live. That's as simple as that. And our responsibility. The picture out here, it shows our social responsibility. We are supposed to protect our environment. And governance, when it comes to governance, yes, there's a gross total lack of governance. And we talk about sovereignty of nations. Have nations been sovereign? They have come to a screeching halt because of a 30 kb virus. And ultimately speaking, is really, and we aren't complaining. We are, the best of men are men at best. Yeah, we're not complaining anybody. We're not complaining Anthony Fauci, who's supposed to be the chief of National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases from 1984 onwards. No, we're not complaining anybody. We have limitations, but we need to really improve our work, the way we work, the way we network, the way we understand problems. And ultimately, I think even a pandemic of this sort, it's not alone probably a scientific question. It's also a question of a theological question. Why do bad things happen in a world like this? Why do bad things happen to good people? That's exactly what is this theodicy about. It's about how could God allow bad things, infants die, children die, things like that. So I think I'm finished off with my talk. So I would like to thank you for this opportunity. Once again, I would like to thank the organizers, Dr. Prema and her team, and Satyabama for giving me the opportunity to speak to you. I hope I've conveyed enough to help us think along these lines, and so that in the days to come, we will actually work together. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, sir. It was a splendid talk, I should say. Apart from the pandemic diseases regularly, which we come to know, there's an added information regarding the computational biology and the data science. So it was quite new to us. Thank you so much, sir. We'll proceed to the question and answer session. So now,
sure.
So the first question is from Usha Sri Raghavendran. He's asking, sir, why pandemic origin is always from Africa and Asian countries, and why can't they control the epidemic not to become a pandemic?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Yeah, probably a lot of, as we saw now, a lot of pandemics have originated in Africa. And I believe it's because people are unaware and people don't contain. Though what happens in remote places and remote forests of Africa and remote jungles of Africa along riverbanks, we understand that people are not aware of things. People are not aware of what is really happening. And it has a slow spread from there, and probably there is a lot of migration also which goes on. A lot of African migration goes on to different countries. That could be another reason, and mostly it is a zoonotic. So a lot of African jungles do have a lot of animals, and you'll be surprised as to how people eat all strange animals in Africa. Yeah, because of a lot of poverty, people go on to eat a lot of meat, which is from a lot of exotic animals, and that's one reason how it comes to humans. And then because of human migration and lack of containment, it moves on. I hope I've convincingly answered that.
It is. There's a question from Raghavi. Why can't we use SARS treatment drug to treat coronavirus infection?
Yeah, we are trying every treatment possible. So we really do not have a proper treatment, even for SARS. All of these are actually part of the coronavirus group. And so we really do not have the actual treatment. We really do not have an efficacious treatment for any of the coronaviruses. That's exactly the point. So that's why we are resorting to anti-malarial things like chloroquine, etc. We really do not have an ideal vaccine or a drug which works against all of these groups of viruses.
The question is so socialic. Partib and Rudrapati has asked this. What is your opinion on lockdown? Is it needed or not?
Absolutely. It's a very nice question, very pertinent question in this scenario. I think we definitely need lockdowns. I think we're having a lot of rest, probably. That's one very real plus with, and we're having a lot of time online in discussing things. But absolutely, because especially in India, we really need to prolong the lockdown. That's what I would say, because cases are increasing and we are letting loose. If we are going to have a problem, we will not be able to contain. If we're going to have another wave, or if we're going to have a drastic community spread, we will not be able to contain it later on. All of this we've done till now is going to get wasted. So it is very important for us to communicate this to the community. Probably we should make, as microbiologists, as people who are listening to this, we should educate the others about this.
Dr. Sumita Jagapati Babu is asking this question. Will developing vaccines for COVID in a shorter than 18-month timeline for development of vaccine will work effectively as compared to the conventional clinical trial-based vaccine? She's meaning that it's a very short time for a vaccine preparation.
Yeah.
Will that work or not?
Yeah, we are, as I told you, we will be testing it as an experimental vaccine only. So we are trying to do all the best we can to prevent loss of life. So right now we cannot actually go on into the usual routine of having a long animal trials and clinical trials, etc. We can't do that, but we're going to make sure that it is safe for human administration, and then we will actually go on. So it is going to be, if they're going to, as they've promised in the 12 or 18 months, if they're going to develop a vaccine, it is definitely going to be helpful and it will be efficacious. though there are a lot of claims, we still do not have a proper report as of now. That's what I understand.
Dr. Lakshmi Priya is asking this, why there is no formal framework for proactive international surveillance and response to any epidemic that may tend to become a pandemic?
Why there is no?
Why there is no formal framework for proactive international surveillance for responses to any epidemic that may tend to become a pandemic?
Absolutely, ma'am. Beautiful question. It's very important for us to think this way. That's what I would say. See, the point is, we don't have solidarity. We don't have unity out here. Do you understand? So we really don't have a unity among the scientists. We do not have a unity even probably with the next lab out here in India, right? So we don't really work together. So even groups of scientists who are working across the world in many countries, they're not working together. We really do not have proactive teams. We really don't have a proper response because of that only. We do not have solidarity. We don't have oneness. So China is blaming China, America is blaming China, China is blaming somebody else. So it goes on like that. So we're only politicizing the issue, but rather than as you see in the movie Independence Day, we're not standing together as mankind to fight an alien organism. You understand? That's exactly what is happening. We are not united. So if we are united, we will have a lot of teams. We will have a lot of preventive measures which can be taken up.
Yes, there's a question from Natarajan Devarajan. What is your opinion about the longevity of COVID-19 in India? When will it get over?
It is going to take a long time. It is going to take a long time, and because we are now only trying to focus on virus, and the spread. Okay, but we are not exactly talking about the host. Again, we have a lot of hypotheses about herd immunity and things like that, and how Indians are going to respond. As a person who tries to look at holistic things, I think the host plays a very important role, especially in a viral infection as this. And when you look at Indian scenario, a tropical country with a lot of difference from all the other countries which have gone through this pandemic, you understand that we do have an advantage in terms of the climate, etc. But we still do not know with the population density and all, we still do not know, and we hear a lot about asymptomatic carriers. We still do not know exactly how things would move on. But the safest thing would be probably we can actually wait for even a year or so. I'm not telling we're going to have a lockdown for a year. I'm telling that we would know the actual scenario only after a year or so.
This question is from Dr. Thirumalai Swami Rakinavil. Why can't we focus a traditional herb with nanobiotechnology-based approach to give a solution for such a pandemic disease?
Absolutely. This is again vital, because this is one of our strong points. In India, we do have our Western Ghats. We do have so much of resources in terms of herbs, and there aren't people enough to go and do research on them. We are not really looking for novel entities, novel molecules. There is so much of resource out there, but I think especially the alternative systems of medicine like Ayurveda and Siddha and all of those, especially scientists who work with them, especially plant biologists, I think we should work together with a microbiologist, a plant biologist, and a biotechnologist, molecular biologist. We should work together to try to actually find out novel compounds. That's exactly where we also come into play as a drug discovery specialist, where we try to do computational aspects of it. So when we try to work together, definitely this method of plant products is really going to go a long way to help us out with a lot of antiviral compounds and drugs.
Sir, this is from Vidya Darmi. Can you explain about the role of the bioinformatic tools or the computational biology in COVID-19 vaccine development? Will it help in reducing proposed timeline for the same?
Yes. As I told you, people have been working day and night. You just go to structural biology databases. You can just search for COVID-19 proteins. There have been within a very short time, people have done the sequencing. They have gone on to study the proteins which are there on the viral spike proteins, as well as the human proteins and the ACE receptor. And you find that there have been a lot of hardcore work which has been going on, and that has laid the foundation for vaccine development and drug development. You see, so you need to understand that it is basically a tool. It is basically a very important, very interesting tool, which is required to aid in molecular biology. If you need to move further, you can't really do the screening for years long. It actually takes a long time. When you work in a wet lab, it takes long time to do this systematically in experimental biology. But computational biology, when you take the help of computational biology, you do it overnight. You do the molecular designing, visualization, docking, simulation. All of these things are done very quickly, and that really helps you out in vaccine and drug development.
So that's the last question from Shweta. She's asking about your opinion about reverse vaccinology.
Reverse vaccinology. Yeah. I think, again, computational biology and reverse vaccinology are very important. Okay, so when you're trying to actually look into vaccines, probably working with newer vaccines or trying to actually work on existing vaccines and try to actually improve upon existing vaccines, all of these things are very important. We have a concept there called repurposing of the existing drugs. Repurposing, you can actually take an existing drug, take an existing vaccine, and we try to actually work on making it efficacious for the current scenario. So probably it has got a lot to do, especially in this, when you try to work on remedies during a short span. Reverse vaccinology is very critical. Reverse vaccinology, immunoinformatics, all of these things are actually a part of computational biology. I think probably we should try to read more about it and work on it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. We'll move into the next session now.
Thank you.
Yes, finally, we have come to the end of the 3-day webinar series. First of all, I would like to thank God Almighty first to make this event a great success. I thank our chairperson, Mrs. Chandra Devi Danikachalam, our beloved principal, Dr. S. Kodai, and the management for their moral support. My heartfelt thanks to our honorable speakers of this webinar series, Dr. Gauri Shankar Rajam, Dr. M. Niranjarian, and Dr. Daniel Alex Anand, to accept our invitation and share their valuable knowledge with us through this dynamic talk sessions. I thank our beloved head, Dr. K. Krishna Prema, Dean of Research and the convener of this webinar series, for being the backbone of this event. A big thank you for the complete moral support rendered by her. My heartfelt thanks to our technical team, Dr. S. Nandini, Dr. M. Reena, Dr. C. Ganga Bahirati, our technical support team members, Dr. M. Linat Navina, Dr. V. Gayatri, Dr. Anisha Balasek, Dr. Mary Sheila, Dr. Sangitavani, and Dr. Subhashini, for the tireless effort and support throughout the event. And dear participants, a big thank you to all of you for your enthusiastic participation and the technical.
Ma'am, your audio is muted. Yeah, no, it's okay now. Yeah.
Okay.
Have you finished, ma'am?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, did my thank you cards came in, sir?
Thank you card, ma'am.
Yeah, the share slided. The slide share came in, sir.
Slide share, I think it didn't come. I think.
The first slide was visible, Vidya. The second slide was not.
Oh, okay. No. So, okay, dear participants, a very big thank you to all of you for your enthusiastic participation in this webinar, for asking questions and regularly posting your feedbacks and your motivating messages through Zoom, YouTube, mail, and other feedbacks. Thank you all. You made this a great event. We will be sending you a mail regarding the recorded version link of today's session, and you will also receive a link for getting more details for the e-participation certificate. Please kindly fill in and post. Finally, I wish to thank my family members, my husband, my father, and my 2 kids for their support and encouragement to host this event during the lockdown period. Thank you all. Have a beautiful evening. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.